Hi, and welcome to Across the Desk. Well, the election's coming up in just a little over a week, and there's a couple of state questions, as well as retaining some judges and other items like voting for president. We're going to go over some of the statewide stuff that will be on the ballot, like the state questions and retention of Supreme Court justices. Election season. Here we go. The general election is coming up, and this is a big one because every 4 years we vote for president, and there'll be a whole bunch of other issues. The ballot is rather lengthy. It's 2 pages, has all kinds of stuff. And depending on where you're at, you may see local district judges or not, and other issues, and voting for your state representative or state senator, depending on where you are. We're going to talk about the statewide stuff that everybody will see in Oklahoma. One, you will see 2 state questions. There's state question 376. And I want to go over these state questions because really they're kind of confusing when you read them and you don't really know what you're voting for or against on some of these state questions. I'm not sure why they wrote them the way they did. Sometimes you look at these state questions and they're rather lengthy and they try to do the best they can to summarize it into a short thing. But going on here, State question 376. This is about creating TIF districts or certain districts inside of smaller communities and especially rural areas where people can get like rural water, sewer, other infrastructure projects going. But once I read the full language that's with this particular state question, it sounds like it makes it really hard to do. For one, you have to have everybody in unanimity. Everybody has to 100% agree that, yeah, we want this infrastructure change done. If one person decides, nope, I don't want to pay for that, well, then it's not going to happen. So it makes it sound like it's harder to do. This also only affects that certain area. So, like, if you're in a part of, say, northeast Oklahoma City, and you want some infrastructure project done, well, one, you got to get everybody to agree to it. The next thing is, no one else is going to be required to pay for that. So you have to come up with your own tax money, you have to come up with your own bond issue or whatever else to pay for this, and it doesn't really help lower class communities, maybe even rural areas where there's just not a lot of GDP or income going on in those areas. So it makes it sound, one, like, oh, this is just a freedom issue, you're going to be able to freely do your own thing, you're going to be able to come up with your own stuff, but really the money won't be there for certain communities, and they can't rely on other communities to help them out. As well as, you've got to be unanimous in the ability to get these things done. So really, when it comes to state question 376, I'm a no vote on this. Now, other people may have a different take, but after I read the full language of it, I was like, hey, this sounds like it's making it harder to do infrastructure projects that people may need, like potable water and sewage and street repairs, stuff like that. Needed things that certain communities may need. And it just made it seem like it's harder to do to me with what's going on here. Now, the next state question is state question 834. And this one kind of got to me because, one, this is a big conservative push, again, nationwide. What they want to do is they want to change the language in the Oklahoma state constitution to say only citizens of Oklahoma can vote in our elections. Well, one, this is erroneous. We already have laws in place that don't allow for people to vote if they're not citizens of Oklahoma or a certain district or whatever else. And this just changes the language a little in the state constitution to make people feel good, I guess. I looked at this and go, hey, we have already got laws in place. This is totally erroneous. This is totally duplicative, and it's totally not necessary. It seems to me like when I was reading the language of this is one of those attempts by politicos to put a state question on the ballot to drive their voters to the polls. Now, Glenn Coffey back in the day was really good at doing this. Hey, we'll get a state question that our side is very red meat about, and it will drive our voters to the polls and we'll win the elections. This seems more of the same to me, because here we are with with a deal on citizenship and voting where we already have laws in place and it really doesn't do anything except throw red meat to a certain side of the audience. And that's really all this state question does. 834, it's a no vote for me. It sounds great on the surface. Oh yeah, why would you not want only citizens to vote? Well, for me, I don't want other citizens to vote that aren't citizens of Oklahoma or the United States of America, and we already have laws in place. So this is just another unnecessary state question that you're going to see on the ballot. So both of these state questions to me are no votes. I'm not going to vote on the one about where you have to have unanimity when it comes to doing infrastructure projects. Oh, and it's only going to be for that small community. They better come up with their own money to do this. No one else is going to help you. So good luck if you're in a very rural area that doesn't have a lot of GDP or a poor section of town that just doesn't have that either. And then, yeah, the other state question about citizenship, that's just erroneous. It's duplicative. It's just unnecessary. So that's a no vote for me. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, it's kind of important. And this has to do with our Oklahoma State Supreme Court. Now, there's 3 judges on there that are coming up for retention. Now, historically in Oklahoma, we retain our judges. And typically, when you look at the record, the Supreme Court of Oklahoma has done a really good job when it comes to judiciary obligations and what they've done. And they serve as a check and balance. So really, we want to keep these judges. And historically, we have. And I think they've done a good job of providing checks and balances against very radical, conservative, and even maybe liberal, though we don't really have that in Oklahoma because, let's face it, it's so gerrymandered here. No Democrat can even get heard in committee, much less get any kind of legislation through that works on any kind of level. So this puts a check on extreme, radical, conservative legislation like we've seen, from Bibles in schools to paying a private religious school taxpayer money, taking it away from public schools, stuff like that. So this really has gotten on the nerves of conservatives. See, conservatives really don't like the checks and balance system that we have. When it comes to things like the constitutionality of things like that, they really don't like it. See, conservatives nowadays are all about the power and control. They really don't care about will of the people. They really don't care about anything else, just that they're right, you're wrong, and we're going to force our will upon you. And that's basically what this is, you see. And it all comes down to, one, that religious charter school that didn't get through because the Supreme Court of Oklahoma said, no, this is definitely goes against the Constitution of Oklahoma, and it does. We're not supposed to give any money for religious anything in Oklahoma. It's in our Constitution, and the Supreme Court of Oklahoma came down and said, this goes against our state constitution and probably even the federal one. Well, this actually frustrated conservatives, especially members of one certain group, which is OCPA. They're a very right-wing, radical, conservative think tank in Oklahoma, and you've probably heard of them at least one time or another. They're ran by a small group of radicals, a guy named Smalls and another guy, Ray Carter. They're big. They put out kind of their own little network and their own media and stuff. And when you read the stuff that they're putting out there, some of it is just fanciful. There's no validity or truth to some of it. And it's just radical, Chicken Little type stuff. And so these guys are really giving a push by sending out mailers to people in Oklahoma saying, hey, we want to get rid of the Supreme Court justices because when it comes to checks and balances, people like Smalls and Carter, well, they just really hate that stuff. So they really want to get rid of these judges in hopes that Kevin Stitt will put in somebody more radical that will be to the leanings of how they want and go against the Constitution and everything else, which is just crazy on its face when you look at it. So my take on this is we want to keep the Supreme Court justices we have right now. Now, you may see other judges on there, district judges or whatever else, depending on where you're at in Oklahoma. And when it comes to those, you're kind of on your own. I'm not going to go through the state of Oklahoma to decide who's what, when, where of judges or anything else. But when it comes to Supreme Court, of the state of Oklahoma. We want to retain them. And typically, the way we've done this since the 1960s has really worked well. Because it used to be that, yeah, we could get Supreme Court justices put in, the governor would do whatever, and it left a lot of room for corruption and everything else. And even Supreme Court justices went to jail back in the 60s due to the major corruption and everything else. So they put together a group in the legislature and came up with a system we have today, where we have a board, pretty much, a committee that vets a whole bunch of judges, gets a list to the governor. Here's a list of judges you can choose from, and the governor chooses from those. And it works really well for the most part, and it has for nearly 60 years. But conservatives want to change that, and they want to get rid of these judges, thinking that Kevin Stitt will pick people that are more radical, that will go against our Constitution in the state of Oklahoma, as well as the federal Constitution, and just do the will of the conservative leaders in our state. And that's pretty much what this is all about. And there you go. That's the ballot. That's the state issues on the ballot that are coming out. Please, everybody, it's really important that you go vote. If you haven't already done early voting, please show up and vote. It's so important. If we actually show up, people that are on the left or Democrats or even those left-leaning independents will win. We can win this, and I'll tell you why. One, the state of Oklahoma is heavily gerrymandered. It is. When you look at the numbers and everything else and compare it to other states, we have the lowest participation rate of just about any state in the nation. And the reason why is because it's gerrymandered so bad. They've gerrymandered it. The Republicans in the state, in their fit to retain power and control, have gerrymandered the state so bad that most people don't participate. So that's how you feel about it. The Democrats go, man, what's the point of voting? We're not going to win. They gerrymandered it to hell and back. And then the Republicans don't vote either because they go, well, we're going to win anyway. I really don't need to show up because we're going to win. But there's the key, see, because when it comes to turnout, even among Republicans, it's really low. It's like 18% or less in some cases. So really, if we just got half the Democrats and independents that are left-leaning to show up to the polls, we'll win some stuff. Because, see, the gerrymandering is so bad that most everybody, I mean, and I'm talking about people that are registered to vote. I'm not talking about people that aren't registered to vote, because there's a whole other issue right there. But people that are registered to vote, only about 20% of them show up to vote. So really, Democrats, independents, show up. Go vote. It's that important. It's coming up here in just a little over a week. It's so important. Please show up to vote. And use whatever I said as a guide. Go check out these state questions. They have them available. It's really easy in Oklahoma to find out what these are about and everything else. And sometimes, like I said, hey, the one state question on the infrastructure project, it's a little out there. I almost had to read it 4 or 5 times just to kind of get an understanding what's going on. But the other state question is very obvious. So anyway, that's the show for this week. Thank you for tuning in. And like I said, go vote. And as always, we'll be seeing you next week.